part 10, row 10 of the Sugaridoo Bernina QAL. Are you ready to do some reverse applique again? Hi there, and welcome to a new video on the Sugaridoo Bernina QAL. My name is Irene and this is Sugaridoo YouTube channel, and today we will be making row 10, part 10 of our quilt along named ... I designed the row to have all circles, but then I thought improv is also nice, so I made an improv option and I kind of went crazy on the improv. So if you want to go for the more basic, just circles, all fine. If you want to go for not just circles but are a little bit oval or not precisely circles and improv in that way, completely fine. But if you want to improv all the way and make something that doesn't really look like circles but more like spots of a cow, maybe, I think that it reminds me of that. That's also perfectly fine. In a template that you can download in the blog post on the Bernina blog, you have lots of options. So I put a lot of different templates in there, not just the ones that I'm showing you in this video. I added a whole lot more so that you have some guidelines to go for your circles. And the technique we're doing, you've probably already spotted it, is reverse applique. So we're going to do circles or improv shapes with reverse applique. In this video I'm going to go over the whole technique again, so if you're unsure about it, don't have to go back to the around the corner row, just watch this video to see me make all these blocks. I am super excited to get started on this one, so let me show you what kind of materials we need. Here we have everything we need today. So I have some cut out tea bag paper and my fabrics. I've already cut it in pieces. I will put the measurements in the screen so you can see the measurements, but they are also in the blog, of course. I've printed out some templates and I have a rotary cutter and my scissors, which I will need to cut out my shapes, some pins, and of course some rulers, and I'm using this little one to show you how you can do it if you only have a little one, but I do have a bigger one, so I will also be using this, and that's mostly because the smaller ruler is 6 inches wide and the block that we will be cutting is a little bit over 6 inches, so therefore it's easier to use a ruler that's bigger. But no worries if you only have the smaller one, I will show you as well how you do it with the smaller ruler. And then we also need a iron and your sewing machine, of course. So everything is ready and set up on my table, so it's time to start making some shapes. For this row there's an option to go with the round circles or to make some improv shapes. And I've just made some wobbly lines over here. But you can use any kind of rounded shapes that you want to make. I already made a preview block and this is the thing that we will be going for. So this is what we will be making. Yeah, so now I'm just going to place my tea bag paper over my shapes and trace them. We will be making 12 blocks in total, so you can make 12 of the shapes on your tea bag paper, and then we will sew it to our background paper. As you can see, my improv shapes are all roughly the 4-inch. So this is a 4-inch circle, and if you're drawing up your own improv shapes, just make sure that they are roughly the same size as a 4-inch circle. Of course, you could also alternate with this. You could make ovals out of it, or make smaller circles inside the bigger circles. Be creative with it. But Make sure that the size is roughly 4 inch. Now we have our shapes done. It's time to sew them to our background fabric. So let's take a background fabric piece. I'm working on the silver background, so the emerald is going to be my main fabric. And what you then want to do is try to find the center of your square. So I'm just going to fold it and press it with my nail. And there we have then the center of the fabric. And now as well you want to find the center of your shape. When it's a circle, it's easy, you can just fold it 2 times and then you notice the center. But with a wobbly shape, that's the same. So just fold it, and then when the lines kind of meet, then you just fold it in half. So you have roughly the center. That's over here, and we have the center over there. We kind of align it. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you're a little bit off, that's fine. So then it's aligned, and I can take this to my sewing machine. When you're working with solids, you don't have to pay attention, of course, to the front and the back. But when you're working with a print fabric, make sure that at this point your print side is facing up. So you're placing your tea bag paper on the printed side of your fabric. Let's take it to the sewing machine. The next step is to trace your lines with your sewing machine. So this one I've already done, and you can see that I followed the line that I drew with my sewing machine. So on the back side you'll see the shape, and on the front side you have the tea bag paper with the line and the sewing line. So that is what we want to do. I'm putting my machine to stitch length 2, so I'm making a little bit shorter stitch length, and I have my needle in a needle down position. Let me show you what that means. You get the needle down position with this little button. So now it's needle up, and now it's needle down. And that means that whenever you stop sewing, the needle will be down. Needle down is especially really nice when you're sewing curves. So whenever I stop, my foot will hover a little bit and the needle will be down. So when I stop and I want to turn, I can just turn freely because my foot is up and my needle is down. It's really nice when you want to go slow and make a corner by making a few stitches and turn a little bit, making a few stitches, turning a little bit. That goes slow, but does give you the most perfect result on making your corners. Just continue sewing like this until you have 12 blocks like this done. All 12 blocks are sewn. Now it is time to cut out our shapes. So let's go ahead and cut out around 1/4 inch within your line. So you're cutting away the center of your block. So the center circle or the center shape that you've made, you will cut out the center, and then you will also do some snipping. You will cut in the line. Oops. Let me focus there. You will cut in the seam allowance until your sewing line. So you make little snippets like this. And that you do all the way around. Yeah, so lots of cutting. Repeat this for all the 12 blocks. Now all the shapes are cut out and we made all of the little snippets in there. It's time to turn the blocks inside out. And that is quite a kind of a tricky task with these shapes, and I guess also with round shapes. So I'm just going to film what I'm doing and explain it, but maybe you have some fun tricks to help do this more easily. Please feel free to share it in the comments below or on our Facebook page, but let me show you how I do it. So turning the shape inside out, yeah, we have our fabric on this side, tea bag paper on this side, and what we want to end up with is our tea bag paper on the other side. So the one that I already did over here. So here is the tea bag paper, and here is just the fabric with our shape nicely showing. So this is what we want, but how to get there? Well, what I like to do is put my fabric side up and then first pull on the edges of the tea bag paper. So just pull those over like so, and then I'll go around. So I'll just start at an edge and I pull it until I see a tiny bit of fabric showing, and then I'll just press it with my finger or my nail, and then I turn it a little bit. So here I'm pressing with my finger to get the whole seam nicely folded until I see a tiny bit of fabric, and then I press it with my finger. So I'm pulling at the tea bag paper and I'm pushing with my finger underneath it so that the fabric will stick out over there. And that way I go all the way around. Let me zoom in, show you a little bit more up close. So I'll pull on this side of the tea bag paper and I will push with this finger to push the seam, the fabric all the way out underneath the tea bag paper. So there we push and then pull the tea bag paper until you see a tiny bit of fabric. That way you make sure that you won't see the tea bag paper on the other side of the block. So what we see now is the back side of the block and the other side is the front. So on the front we don't want to see any tea bag paper. There we go. I guess we're all the way around. So that's it, and this now needs a nice press. So I'm just going to place this on my ironing board and give it a really nice press. Time to give it a good press. So once you've folded all the paper to the other side and none of the paper is sticking out on the front, try to lay it as flat as possible on your ironing board and then press it. Flat, flat, flat. So when this is nice and flat, we can also sew it nice and flat on our main fabric. Ta-da! There's the first one, nice and flat with our tea bag paper at the back. This will be a pretty cool idea for a baby quilt, I guess. A kind of a peekaboo quilt. So where you make these holes and then have nice fabric that peeks through it. Oh well. Fun idea for another quilt. I really love how nice and crisp the edges look after you pressed it. So cool. So nice and flat. I love it. I would love to try a wool pressing mat, by the way. This mat is really nice. Well, ironing board actually. There's wood inside here. But I heard that wool pressing mats are also awesome for having super flat seams. Yeah, would love to try that. And when you see paper peeking out, just go back in and fix it. There we go, all blocks done. For the next step we need our blocks, our main fabric and needles. So what we will do is take one of the blocks, take a main fabric or accent fabric, place it behind, place this a little bit in the center. There we go. And then take some needles, pins, and pin it in place. There we go, all nicely pinned. This is ready to be sewn, but first I'm just going to batch it and pin everything first. The most fun part of this technique, I think, is sewing your back fabric, so the main fabric, to the front of the block. So that's what I'm going to do now. I am going to set my stitch length to 3, just a tiny bit bigger than the standard stitch length. And but if you want to use a decorative stitch or a blanket stitch or something for applique to applique the front to the back, feel free to use whatever you want. Yeah, let's stitch some blocks and then we only have to trim them and sew the row together. So I said that after the sewing we would only have to trim our blocks, but I forgot a step. You also have to cut away the excess on the back. So here you see we have excess tea-bag paper and excess fabric, and we need to cut away both of those. So just take your scissors and fold away. So this is your front of your block, so you will fold away the fabric on the front and just go and cut in there and cut around the seam that you've sewn. Try not to cut in in the backing fabric. That would be a shame. Then you would have to make a new block. So like this tiny bit I did here, try to cut away to about 1/4 of an inch all the way around the block. And then for all the 12 blocks the same. Yeah, so cut away the excess and then we're going to square up our blocks. So now we get to trimming our blocks. And I calculated quite a difficult size. So we have our blocks. And the blocks are going to be 7 inches high. So far so good, 7 inches, that is including seam allowance. But they are going to be 6 3/8 of an inch across. Strange size, but that's the size I picked to have the 12 blocks nicely aligned over the whole row, or spaced out over the whole row. And then at both sides of the row there's a little bit of background fabric, because when I would pick a better size for the blocks, then the circles will be spaced out until the complete edges of the row, and then I would already see myself having to sew the binding over their block. Hello. Goodbye. So best way was to do 6 3/8 of an inch, and 3/8 that's okay, that is on your ruler. This is 1 inch, of course, and those tiny stripes, tiny marks, there are eight of them in an inch, so you can easily see on your ruler what is 3/8 of an inch. But when you're making the block with the circle, I can imagine that you want your circle to be nicely in the center, so that on both sides of the 4-inch circle you would need to have 1 3/16 of an inch. That doesn't work nicely, so let me show you how to do that. So let's start by cutting a block that doesn't have the circle, so it's not perfectly symmetrical. We don't need to find the exact center of the block or something. And let's start by cutting it to 7 inches high. So when I place my ruler like this, I see that I need to chop off about this amount of fabric. So just going to place my ruler in this direction so I can easily chop it off. But then you will see why it's a little bit more difficult with a tiny ruler, well, a smaller ruler, than with a big one, because this is only 6 inches wide and we want to cut off 7 inches. So I'm going to place my ruler like so and line up the 7-inch line over here. So as you can see, it won't reach all the way to the top. But what you can do is just move while you're cutting. So I'm cutting, then I'll leave my rotary cutter there. I just move my ruler and I'll line out these marks on the 7-inch line and then cut the last part. So then I have a perfectly 7-inch measure. Okay, next cut. So now we want to cut the 6 3/8 of an inch. And then to roughly place it in the center, I can put my finger so I know where it is, and then I just eyeball that I have here kind of the same amount of fabric as I have here above the 3 3/8 inch mark. So yeah, I kind of eyeball that, and now I know it's about the finger width. Just going to eyeball this because it's not symmetrical. It's supposed to be a bit wobbly, so it doesn't have to be exactly in the center. So I've cut that off. Now I'm going to do the same again with moving my ruler. So here I line up my ruler over here, and then on this side I place it at 6 3/8 of an inch, and then I cut it. Move it, line it up 3/8 of an inch over there and over here. There we go. So there you have a block cut with a wobbly shape. But now what if you're doing a circle and you want it to be nicely in the center? Well, I didn't make any circles, but let's pretend this is a circle. So what you want to do then is fold your circle in half. I would make a center line like this. And you do want to have the line kind of parallel with your outer edges. And I would also make a center line like this. Okay, there we go. So when you do that with your circle, you have now the center of your circle. And then let's start by making a 7-inch block. So 7 inches divided by 2 is 3.5, right? So on my fold line, I am going to place the 3.5 mark of my ruler. And then, just to make sure that it's going to be 7 inches, I'm not going to look at the center line. Well, I can check it, of course. 1, 2, 3.5. That's nicely in the center. But mostly I'm going to pay attention to this side, that the 7-inch line is on there. So there we have the 7 inches. And what you want to do now when you have a circle, you use your center line and you measure 3 inches and 3/16 of an inch to this side. So let's see, we have 1, 2, 3 inches, and then we want to be between this 1/8 and this 1/4 of an inch. So there we go. I just place the fold line between this 1/8 and a 1/4 inch. And what I also want to do is line up this side or this side with the line that I already cut. So there it goes. That should be getting my semicircle in the center. Yeah, so you can do that the same on the other side, so that should be over here. But I'm again going to rotate my ruler and look for, let's see, 6 3/8 of an inch over here, and then I can again check it. 1, 2, 3, between the 1/8 and a 1/4. Yep, that is in between there. So that's perfect. Nicely aligned, nicely centered. There we go. Yeah, and if this was a circle, this would now be nicely centered on your block. That's how I would measure it and how I would trim it to have your circle. If you made perfectly round circles, you do want to have them in the center, so that way you can measure it out. But don't be too alarmed if your cutting isn't too precise, or if you lose some fabric with your sewing, because there is a tiny bit of wiggle room on the outer edges. So if you lose a lot of fabric in your seams and your row gets shorter, just add some strips of background fabric on there. And if you have tiny seams, so smaller than a 1/4 inch, and your row gets longer, then look, besides the blocks, you still would have room to cut some fabric away. So that's it. Those are instructions to get it super accurate and try to get that 3/16 of an inch at the side of your block. But if you don't manage and you get the size roughly okay, that's fine. Don't get scared because of this odd sizing of the block. It just turned out that way. But I hope the overview of how you can turn and use a small ruler that is smaller than the size of your block, how you can still use that to trim your blocks. I hope that's useful. And just take your time. Measure it twice or 3 times, 4 times before you cut. Then I'm sure that you will be okay. Let's trim those blocks and put our row together. Final step, sewing all the blocks together. Just going to sew them together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm putting my accent block as the 7th block from the left. Let's see how these look together. Da 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 da. It is done, it is done. All 12 pieces in one row. With the excess piece kind of somewhere in the middle. I love how this turned out. I kind of went crazy with the improv shapes. You can go a little less crazy if you want to. You can just go for ovals or circles that are almost circles, but this is also nice. So there we have our row 10, part 10 of the quilt along done. It's done. I'm super curious what you make of this, because with the around the corner row I saw some awesome improvs. Also with the other improv rows though. Yeah, I really like how creative you get on making the rows. So yay for that. And yeah, that's a row, and only 2 more left. Kind of sad. Yeah, well, it is what it is. When we are finished, we should definitely get on to a new quilt along. Well, we're not finished in 2 months, because after that we have to assemble it. So 4 weeks after the 12th row is released, I'm going to release a video on how to assemble it and what things you need to put it together. That information I will also share earlier in the blog post, but then I'm going to make a video about it. And then 4 weeks after that, I'm going to start with a mini quilting series where I'm going to teach you how to quilt your quilt. Going to do the absolute basics with a straight line quilting, going to do ruler work, going to make it in 3 parts, going to make it in 1 whole. So I'm going to cover all of it. So if you're a little bit scared of how you're going to quilt such a huge quilt, don't be. I've got your back. We're going to go through that together. So the quilt along, even though we only have 2 rows left, is not nearly finished. Super excited about that. So yeah, that's it. That's all I had to say. That's it for this week's video. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed putting the vlogs together and making row 10. See you again soon. Bye bye.